welcome to Shan Khosla Tutoring Services. I know the setup is a little different today. We're shooting during the day. It's just because I've got so many comments and so many emails about doing an LNAT question with you, and that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Oh my God! Wow!
Stick around and I will show you the method that I use myself that helps me navigate through the LNAT. Just a reminder that I do offer tutoring services for the LNAT and the personal statement. You can sign up in the link below. I also run a Fiverr where I can edit any personal statement or essay that you send my way.
With me, without me. With me, without me.
To dive right in, we're going to be looking at the LNAT sample test from 2010 that's available on the website. We're going to be doing the first question so you can understand my methodology and you can understand how I approach these questions. I myself received a 27 on my LNAT and will be attending UCL Laws this September. So stay tuned and let's work on the first question. Great, so let's dive right in. We're going to look at the first essay or the first passage on physicians and patients. This is from the 2010 sample test of the LNAT, like I said. Feel free to pause the video and read over it once, or you can read with me. Great, now that you've had a time to read over this and go over the passage, let me introduce the technique that I use, and we will follow that technique through and through to answer questions in this passage. Let's look at the questions that are asked of us. So first question, which of the following pairs is not used in opposition in the passage? The writer takes the view that why might voluntary euthanasia be against Kantian principles? Now remember, a lot of LNAT professionals, a lot of people who've given the LNAT before will tell you to read the questions first and then the passage. That's a terrible idea. Don't ever do that. What happens with a lot of people is that they read the questions and then they go back to the LNAT and start tracing. I would recommend that technique if you're preparing for the LSATs because it's the limited time that's available to you. But with the LNAT, the kind of time that you have per passage and per question, please do take that time. So the method I'm going to teach you today to answer these questions is called view stamp. Now view stamp is a motto, or view stamp is an ideology that you should live by. View basically means pointing out the different viewpoints in the passage. S stands for the structure of the passage, a mind map that you need to create in your mind as soon as you finish reading the passage. T is the tone of the passage, A is the arguments in the passage, and MP is the main point of the passage. Essentially, you need to be able to, once you're done reading, you need to be able to go through view stamp. You need to be able to point out these aspects of the essay: the view, the structure, the tone, the argument, and the main point. So if we were to begin even diving deeper into this essay, let's think of the view, right? What would the view be? There are three views that seem to be coming out. And the three views are the conservative medical community, the radical social reformers, who doctors believe to be philosophers or feminists or lawyers who are speaking about the rights of patients. And third is the author themselves. So what is the point of view of the author? Next, if we look at the structure, right? Now we need to be able to create a mind map of where things are. So say the first paragraph tells us what traditional physicians believe, how they are treated, what they think of patients, and then we dive deeper. There's a criticism of them. There is some sense of rights of patients coming up, some sense of backlash from traditional physicians, and then there are questions to how this approach would be used in terms of mentally ill patients or patients who need to be euthanized. What is the structure? And then towards the end, we have almost like a finalization of the author speaking. So you need to be able to create this structure in your mind before you begin. The tone. Now the tone of this essay is, of course, in some sense informative, right? What the author is trying to do is tell us about a debate that's occurring. The author is telling us that there's a debate that's occurring. The author has laid out all the points before us. It's almost informative. It's telling us about something that's in contention and what the contention is and who are the parties involved. Now, what's the argument? Now, this is a tricky one because a lot of people get confused between the argument and the views or the different viewpoints of the parties available. There is a little bit of a sophistication here in terms of the fact that views are views themselves, but there's also an argument to back them. Now, if you go to the paragraph, we will see what is the argument that is put forth by these conservative physicians, right, in terms of defending their viewpoint. Their viewpoint is the fact that physicians should have the right, physicians should have the burden to make the decision for the patient. So if we look at their argument is that some physicians reject such criticisms, and they basically reject criticisms by any kind of social reformers because they say that you don't understand what happens inside a hospital. That is their argument towards this. And the social reformer would reply by saying that this treatment just fundamentally belongs to the patient out of sheer need of dignity. Out of respecting human dignity, you need to give that to the patient. And therefore, this aspect confers some sense of adult status to them. And you have to give them that no matter how all-knowing or how experienced you are as a physician. That's the argument that's been made by the social reformers. So even if you look at this image here, this will tell you about aspects that I was speaking about in terms of tracing the argument between the three parties. Of course, the argument of the author becomes the main point, which we discuss next. The main point, like I said, is the argument of the author. This can be found towards the last paragraph, the last line. What the author is saying is that the question has really become who decides, right? And that becomes the main point of this essay. The essay essentially is telling us that the real question in medical sciences and in hospitals today has not been a question of what the decision is, but as much as who decides. That really is the main point of the entire essay. Now, if we look at some questions that you could ask yourself as soon as you finish, to help you, what is the author trying to tell me throughout this passage? We know now what the author is trying to tell us. The main point we know. We understand the debate that's going on. We understand the main point. We understand that it's about who decides, right? What groups are involved? Again, we know social reformers, which are the radicals, the conservative, medical professionals, and the author themselves. What is the tone of the passage? Again, informative, someone who's telling us about a debate that's going on while laying out an entire view. Can you mentally map the passage? We just did. So let's look at the questions again. Now that we've created this structure, we've created this model, let's go back to these questions. Which of the following pairs is not used as an opposition in the passage? And again, because we know the structure we've mentally mapped out, we need to go and trace each and every single one of them. If we go tracing, we will find that, let's trace, right? The first is in the second paragraph, although still supported by religious texts and medical tradition, this ideal physician is increasingly criticized as paternalistic, too willing to act on the judgments of a patient's best interests without the patient's knowledge, yada, yada, yada. And that goes ahead to say that it is said they really know their patients well enough to make this assumption without serious risk of ignorant arrogance. Given hospital hierarchy, such a paternalistic physicians seem to resemble Victorian patriarchs. Now, this really isn't in opposition because they're speaking about the ideal physician from these ideal groups being the Victorian patriarch themselves. So this isn't really in opposition. So this is something we should consider. Let's keep this as the answer at the moment. Adult and children, very clearly, we can look at adult status on patients who paternalists regard as children. This is in the fourth paragraph, so it's clearly in opposition to each other. Quasi-familial with quasi-legal, again, in opposition. Quasi-familial was replaced with quasi-legal. We can cancel that out. Patriarch and batterer, again, if we look at this paragraph here, which speaks about, again, fourth paragraph, a physician who treats without such consent is not a patriarch but a batterer. Again, it's not a patriarch but a batterer. Therefore, they're being used in opposition to each other. It's, again, very replacement-wise, the same way we saw with quasi-familial and quasi-legal. We can cancel that out. Paternalism and autonomy, very clearly, pretty much the theme of the entire essay. But you can see, right, when we look at the last paragraph, about paternalism and autonomy, whatever the scope of principle of patient autonomy, this challenge of paternalism has shifted the categories of concern. Again, paternalism is served as a challenge to the principle of autonomy. So again, it's an opposition to each other. So very clearly the answer is the first one, right? The ideal physician and Victorian patriarch. The synonyms, the ideal physician is almost being used sarcastically. It's being spoken about as the ideal physician from this conservative community. The writer takes the view. Again, we know the main point. We know what the author is trying to say. Very clearly, the answer is D. The most important question in medical ethics today is who decides. If you look at the last paragraph, one of the last lines is about this. Why might voluntary euthanasia be against Kantian principles? Again, important. Now, these Kantian principles are brought forth by which group? Now, we know that the social reformers speak about this Kantian principle, right? Why do they speak about the Kantian principle? We know their argument. Their argument was about human dignity. So when we look at this line here in the 5th paragraph, does the principle contra Kant cover voluntary euthanasia? And the paragraph right above that trace to Kantian notions of respect for persons and inherent human dignity, which means anything that is Kantian is associated in this essay as something to do with dignity, something to do with self-respect. So if we look at the 3rd question, the answer is fairly clearly B, because contra Kant, which means essentially against Kant, which means against anything to do with dignity or respect. Now, we know this because we know the different viewpoint brought forth by the social reformers that are speaking about human dignity. This is how I would go about answering these questions. Once I have this structure at the back of my mind, the structure of view stamp that we spoke about and these questions, it will be very simple for you to really chalk these out and put answers. Once you've created a mental map, you will be able to trace out where things are quite easily and really be able to save time. But again, I would reinforce, do not read the questions first and then look at the paragraph. That's a mistake a lot of people make. You really do go wrong because sometimes there are paragraphs who have linking information all over which you might miss out tracing the questions. So please don't read the questions first. Thank you so much for watching. Again, a reminder, I run my own tutoring service for the LNAT, the personal statement, and any kind of college essays. You can sign up in the link below. I also run a Fiverr, where I can edit any kind of personal statement you've written down or an essay. I'd be happy to do that for you. Do let me know if you have any other questions, any concerns, any comments. I'm going to try and do a lot more videos like this where I solve it with you. So I will now try and look at other content rather than the official one provided by the LNAT to try and see if we can look at some sort of diversity of questions and whether view stamp works everywhere else. Do let me know if you have any other questions, any other concerns or suggestions for videos. I'd be happy to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, and please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.